Hi and welcome to the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast for athletes, coaches and professionals who want to achieve their goals faster. I'm David Charlton and I'll be sharing proven methods from leading athletes, coaches and experts that will help you get the most from your talent. Today's show is sponsored by Functional Intelligent Training, who are a sports injury clinic located in Gosforth near Newcastle upon Tyne and specialise in athlete development, nurturing future champions, strength and conditioning support and excellent rehabilitation services. Today I'm joined by Andy Paisley. Andy had an excellent career as an amateur golfer and is now an experienced golf coach to many golfers, from talented youngsters involved in the county and national setups to European Tour winners. Welcome, Andy.
Hi, Dave. How are you doing? Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too. I'm really looking forward to this. Obviously, we've known each other for a good few years now. I mean, I'm pretty sure the listeners will get some nice nuggets, nice gems from the conversation here.
Yeah, hopefully.
I would think so. So specifically, the idea of the chat today is to look at pressure and how, as a golfer, people can practice more effectively. We'll also go on to discuss mistakes golfers make and useful coping strategies.
Yeah.
So firstly, as a player, what was the most stressful or pressurized situation you found yourself in on the golf course?
There's been a few. I think, I remember when I first started to become a decent player when I was around 15, 16 and got the scratch. Yeah, golf just felt so fun. There was never really any stressful times. You're playing them with your friends in the club and the county, and you're one of the better players of life. And golf was pretty simple, pretty easy. And I remember the first kind of stressful times were when I was in and around England national squads and playing in national events and going to national tournaments when maybe you felt like your game wasn't where it should be, and you feel this weight of expectation from England selectors watching you, and not wanting to let family down, coaches down, all kind of things that, looking back at, pressure I put on myself. But, knowing that you weren't technically at your best and knowing that the stakes were a lot higher than you've been used to, that for me was when I really remember stressful situations, almost a feeling that I couldn't compete. I couldn't swing the club the way I wanted to swing the club. I wasn't free the way I would normally play. It's amazing what that stress can do to you technically and mentally, I guess. And then I remember playing, when I did turn pro, playing in Europro events and doing okay, but just, whether it's to make a cut or to, the money stresses, definitely. I think that's when the separation comes between the players that make it and don't. The guys that can deal with that stress and still perform at their best, and the guys that don't do it. I think that's the biggest factor. It's hard to judge the people on a practice ground, the differences, but doing it when the stakes are a little bit high, I think that's when you find out about a player's true ability and character.
Definitely. No, you mentioned some interesting ones there, because often I find players can sometimes get too technically focused in some respects, and they do find it really, really difficult when their game isn't there. So As a coach now, what sort of advice do you give your players in those type of situations?
I mean, looking back for me then, I didn't have a psychologist. I didn't, I read a couple of Bob Rotella books, but, there was not the knowledge there is now of how to deal with those sort of situations. I just felt if I practiced harder and worked harder, I would be able to do it. But that definitely didn't work for me. I almost, the more I practice for something, the more I think about my swing, and instead of my thoughts and my mindset going to how I have to think in the right way, I just think more technically, and definitely didn't work. And I guess now, I mean, like I say, we've known each other for a long time, and I've spoke and listened to some amazing psychologists, read a lot of great psychology books, and I always say to my players, go to your training. What would you when you're doing your drills and your training? If you're doing your putting drills, for example, as a coach, I try to set up drills that will reflect as best we can the same situation. So we're trying to practice the mindset that you're going to be going through in that drill. So when you are under pressure, your mindset is going to that putting green where you would normally train, or going to that driving range where you would normally hit balls. You're trying to take yourself almost out of the situation. And you hear people talking about that word, going through your stick to your processes. And I think that's in your training. If you can build strong mental processes, and it's amazing how when the pressure is there, I think the best players, they just it's almost autopilot. They just do what they're trained to do. So I think it's hard to just switch it on if your training isn't good. Your training mentally has to be really good, and then you can call on that when the time comes, when the pressure does mount.
I like that when you mention the word process. It would be interesting to see how many talented amateur golfers and professional golfers actually train in the right way and train that process, or even having an awareness of what that process should look like under pressure, and what it looks like when they're having a knock around, when they're calm and relaxed, and really importantly, what that process looks like when they play their best golf.
Yeah. I think coaching's definitely improved a lot over the last few years. There's a lot more focus on performance coaching. So rather than just coaching a golf swing, you're coaching, whether that's like different skills tests with TrackMan, or different putting tests. You're trying to really train real life scenarios rather than just a technical skill. And definitely with some of my elite players, certainly when I'm coaching at a tour event now, my coaching is more around performance than technical. You're not going to be able to change too much technically in someone 2 days before a big event, but you can do a lot to their mindset a couple of days before an event. Yeah, that a big part of my coaching now, certainly nearer a competition and with more elite players, is around performance and building a strong mindset with good resilience.
You also mentioned about working harder. That was potentially a trap that you fell into. Do you see that again with other people sometimes? Yeah, it's something I've noticed where people can, the tournament itself, if they could be in a nice sort of relaxed state, that would be the ideal, or at least as relaxed as they're likely to be. But sometimes they end up 24, 48, 72 hours before, working harder and harder and like reacting to the situation. So they're in a way that they're burnt out before they even start. Do you see that much?
Yeah, 100%. I think typically with like either younger top amateurs or younger pros that are trying to, on that journey to make it to the top level, I work with quite a few people like that. They've still got so much enthusiasm, so much energy, and so much desire to be at the top, and they've been told they have to work hard, and it's having that education, and it's defining working hard, isn't it? Does working hard mean standing on the range for 8 hours a day, hitting 500 balls? Then no, it's been working hard in a smart way. So, you thinking about the energy you need, how much time can I realistically practice and still have energy to compete? So yeah, working hard and working smart are two different things. And I think it's education and time knowing what works for you, because some players need to hit a lot of balls and they need to feel like they're practicing a lot. And some players need to do the opposite. They need to really lay off it. So I think it's finding your balance of what's the way you can perform at your optimum. I don't think there's a formula that you can come up with and say this. You need to practice for this many hours, that many times a week, and you have to really find that what works for you. But be honest, if it isn't working for you, being able to change it, maybe cut back a little bit. And I think definitely a few players I work with, they maybe feel if they do cut back, they feel guilty and they feel like they're not working hard enough and they're not going to be able to, they don't deserve it, which is a bit of a mental hurdle to get over, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree. Some players would benefit from having another hobby to go alongside their golf in some ways, just so they can switch off from it. But like you say, they can feel guilty, and then that negative self-talk comes in, doesn't it? And they start criticizing themselves, and it just can spiral out of control.
Yeah, guilt practice never works out well, does it?
No.
Like practicing there because you really feel like you should, not because you know that it's the right thing to do. I think everyone's been there. I should be doing this, so I'll do it. But that rarely kind of works out well in my experience.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, like your optimum mindset when you're standing over a golf ball, really, you want to be You want to have good posture, so you're feeling 7 foot tall. You want to be like energized and thinking positive things, seeing clear targets.
Yeah.
And it's the exact opposite, isn't it? When you work yourself into the ground and like you say, you're feeling guilty for practicing.
Yeah, that worry, that guilt, the negative terms you would kind of put around that. I think your practice should promote all the things that you just said there, Dave. Like your practice should be promoting good technique, but it should be promoting confidence, resilience, and just that optimism that you can go and play well. And it can't just be, if I get my golf swing or my putting stroke technique to a certain point, then it can never let me down. I think that used to be, maybe 10, 20 years ago, if you worked hard enough and you hit enough balls, you would have a swing that could do the right thing all the time. But yeah, I think if you're practicing with good attitude and you it's promoting the right mindset every time you practice, I think that's where the most effective practices come from.
Definitely, no, I totally agree. Yeah, one of the questions I try to ask like all of the guys I work with is like, yeah, when you're practicing, does it make you feel confident? And if it
Yeah,
doesn't, then potentially, you need to look and mix a few things up and change things.
yeah,
So yeah, thinking about again as a coach and like some of the players you work with, certainly the professional level, you've worked with some winners and you've guys who've had bad experiences where they've lost their card and things like that. Do you want to talk about some of those stressful situations they found themselves in and how they coped with it?
yeah. I guess I've had it both ways. I think when you think of stress and pressure, there's different forms of stress and pressure. You've got the pressure of maybe winning a tour event or winning a national event, and that's kind of good pressure. It's the pressure that every athlete wants to feel. The chance to win and be successful. And then you've got the pressure, the negative pressure of maintaining your card, the negative pressure of making a cut, the negative pressure of just enough money to make a living. There's so many stressful situations, and I work with like challenge tour and main tour players that have lost their cards and um, guys that have kind of been on the bubble and then made their cards, and it's a real roller coaster. I remember Justin Walters. Work with Justin Walters. He's a South African guy on the European tour, and he had a really difficult year last year. He lost his father. He got injured. Which meant he missed a lot of the big tournaments. And with about 4 events to go, he looked. He was about 150th on the rankings, and he needed to make more money in the last 4 events than he had done all year. And the way he responded was amazing. He kind of all of a sudden he was more open to things, and we had some good chats. So I'm just one of his coaches. He has a good team, and he basically finished. He bogeyed the last hole in Portugal to not get in a playoff. He would have got in a playoff if he parred the last. So he finished, I think, joint tied third and kept his card. And so that was an amazing experience. Like from all the highs and lows, he came out and there was a real high. And then, there's guys that have like my brother, for instance, Chris Paisley's. I've been with him from missing his tour card to like I remember one year he held a 20-footer in Hong Kong on the last green to keep his card. If he missed that 20-footer, he would have lost his card. And
So how did he stay calm and in the moment for that particular putt? Any ideas?
what I said before, you remember him telling me. He said what he always says, or he says, aim perfect and repeat your rhythm. He didn't say this is to keep your card. He didn't say we have this kind of little self-talk thing that we do as he's kind of going through. So he does his practice strokes, and as he puts the putter behind the ball, and the last thing he says to him, he says, is aim perfect and repeat your rhythm. And because that's what he thinks and does all the time in his training, that was obviously a much more stressful putt, but he went through the exact same process, and he made that one. But I think also there's lots of experiences where he's missed cuts and lost his card and had terrible times and learned from that. And I think it's not like it wasn't those magic words that made him hold that putt. He's kind of learned to be resilient from. He's had that many setbacks and failures, and I guess that's probably the biggest thing with the most successful players I work with. When they go through a difficult time or just add one difficult experience, they generally come out the other side better and stronger. With players that maybe you don't see again, they'll have those difficult times and they don't respond maybe in the right way. They try too hard, they don't try hard enough, and they don't learn from. But the successful guys kind of learn from their mistakes, and they're definitely better off it. Chris has had some really difficult times in his career where he struggled with his game, but every time he comes through them, he's comes out stronger and better the other end. So I think being a coach, you've got to kind of look at those good situations and the bad situations, and kind of always look to what can you learn from it. So that's the conversation I have with all my players. That bad experience that you've just had, what we're going to learn from that, and how we're going to use it to get better. And again, the good situation, what things there did you do well that we can learn to do more often? So everything that happens, you can take something from it and learn from it. I think that's the key takeaway there.
That's huge, isn't it? Because ultimately that's going to be the difference between success and mediocrity, really, isn't it? Or success and failure.
Yeah.
You see so many people who don't take that time, or they haven't got the support in place to actually learn from it, and they just get busy again, don't they? And just go on and just go around in circles. Like, an interesting point when you mentioned, gets back to process there, would be Chris and the imperfect stick to his rhythm. I find some people can get bored with that, where you need to be continually practicing and saying those keywords over and over again when you're going through your practice. But yeah, often people will try it 5 or 6 putts and then they forget about it, and it doesn't work that way.
That's what I see in good players so much more. Their acceptance and their ability, their grit to kind of keep doing the boring things again and again and again and again. And there's things that I've worked on with some of my players that we've done for years, and like I sometimes think, should I look to freshen this up? Should I do something different to like make it more interesting? You think, well, now this is one of the key reasons of why they've become so good at that skill, being able to do, I think it'd be great if your practice could always be really fun and really enjoyable and be new, but the reality of training at an elite level is that you've got to do things a lot for a long period of time to be good at it. You can't just kind of look for that. They understand that they can't think that one magic thing and they're suddenly going to be great at that skill. They've got to just put the hours and hours of like the same stuff, but they're not kind of going through the motions of it. They really mean it and they really think it. So that's a great skill for everyone to try and work at. Have they got the grit and resilience to kind of keep doing the boring stuff well?
Even if it doesn't work the first time as well. I suppose like that situation there where we're talking about the process over putting, if someone did it for a full round in a competition on a Saturday or in a Europro or whatever it is, and they didn't put very well, often they would ditch it halfway through and try something completely different. Sometimes you just got to grind your way through that, haven't you? And then
but it was probably something else that was causing them to not make them putts. It wasn't the fact that they were saying the wrong things. There was maybe like a setup issue or something like that. It could be. That's the thing with golf and most sports. There's so many variables that will define or dictate success and failure that you can't just pin it on one thing. So I think you've got to have almost the non-negotiables of things that you have to do all the time, and then there will be other things that you maybe need to tweak and change and try. But yeah, I think most people are generally looking for that one magic thought that's going to suddenly make they maybe like put a ball mark on their left pocket instead of the right pocket, and they start holding a few putts in there. I'm away. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, change the grip the cack-handed for the last few holes or something like that.
That short-term mindset generally lead to long-term kind of good skill acquisition, does it?
Definitely. Like one last question I'd like to explore would be, obviously on a golf course, you're out there for anywhere between 3.5, 4.5, 5 hours plus if you're a 2-hour pro.
Yeah.
You can sometimes have a good 5 to 10 minutes in between shots with a lot of thinking time, really. And like people can obviously then dwell on past mistakes, they can get ahead of themselves, think about lifting the trophy, all that sort of stuff. What advice would you offer players in order to stay grounded in that present moment?
I think it's good to be able to you can let your thoughts wander between shots, and you can kind of go and think about what you having for dinner that night or whatever. But I think the thing I tell my players all the time in training is every shot you ever hit, you've got 10 out of 10 concentration. You're trying to put a measure of how well you're focused and how much you're concentrating on the shot that you're trying to do. So you're practicing the art of concentration. So if in practice that you're very mindful over every shot you hit in practice, you're really focused on what you do, that becomes a habit. So when you come to hit the shot, my little trigger when I play is still before every shot 10 out of 10 concentration, Andy, and that almost kind of mentally just switches me on into what I've got to do, and that really gets me into aiming and getting my grip right and my fundamentals. So it's almost like having a little trigger like that to remind yourself to switch on and really focus on what is the task in front of you and how you're going to go about that. And yeah, I think that really helps me. And if I've hit a bad shot, but I know that my focus and concentration was good, then that's all you can do. You're gonna hit bad shots even with the best concentration, but you're just trying to increase your chances. So again, have a way of how you practice, like a measure, a lot of psychologists talk about a mental scorecard and things like that. But if you can, I think it's hard if you don't practice that way and you suddenly try to play that way, it's probably not going to happen. I think I know that's something you probably work on with your players, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I look at is ask them, what do you do when you're at your best? So I get players to write down what their process looks like when they're at their very best. And then when they do skills challenges, like lots of top players do, they would rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 10 for each shot as to how close they were to their best in their process, or for their intensity levels, or even for specific parts in their process, in their routine. So let's be honest, it's very easy to get a little bit overly technical at times, and I find this method can help you strip that back so that you develop really good habits.
Yeah.
And another thing I look at is in between shots. How do people go about spending their time? You've got the sociable golfer who spends that time between shots having a chat with their playing partners, their caddy and what have you. Then we'll make a note of that. If you've got the person who, I suppose, scans the scenery, and you mentioned about mindful and looks around, then that could be a thing for them to think about. Like you say, that the whole thing about concentration over the shot. And yeah, I would potentially go down the mental scorecard route, so they rate themselves either hole by hole or every 3 holes, 4 different areas like that.
Yeah. Do you not think that's an underrated word and an under-practiced skill is concentration?
Yeah, hugely under practiced, and let's face it, it's getting worse, isn't it, now with mobile phones and
dedicated 10 minutes in every practice session to the art of concentrating on whatever it is you're doing, solely focusing on that thing. I have a big debate with my younger players all the time about they like to listen to music when they practice against it, and they obviously like to listen. They always argue with me because they think they focus better. And my point is they probably enjoy the practice more because they're being distracted. They like listening to their music, but they're not really focused in on the practice. So if you're an elite player, should your practice always be really enjoyable, and should it be like I've had just the best time ever there, or should it be really focused and quite hard and you've been really focused on what you're doing? I don't think Olympic marathon runners love every minute of their training, and swimmers, and I think if you're a young player or you're just a casual golfer, then yeah, go and listen to music and have fun. But I think if you're training to be elite, then you've got to train to really focus in on what you're doing and listen to the sound of the golf ball and be able to take in everything around you. I think that's a really important thing. So definitely, I would say dedicate a specific amount of time to the art of concentration would be a good
little tool for people. Yeah, no doubt about it. In a way, yeah, 10 minutes worth of really concentrated practice could be more effective than 45 minutes and hours worth of, ball after ball after ball, or like you say, a bit of music on.
Yeah, definitely.
And when you talk about music there, again, I see it a lot where players have their headphones on when they're hitting shots. I'll see it in other sports as well, like snooker and pool, where they've got their headphones on. And the sports psychology research out there will tell you that it's not a good thing, that the brain can only take in so much information, that you can only concentrate on a certain amount of stimuli, and adding music to it is not going to help you one iota. Yeah, put some music on before you do a task. It might stimulate you and get you motivated, but certainly don't do it when you're standing over a 3-foot putt, when you're hitting that 6-iron, that wedge. I'd say definitely not. So we'll look to wrap up very shortly. What would you say are the three key bits of advice you would give people, players who want to get better and play better under pressure?
So I think probably my biggest one is the art of reflection. Reflect on what you do. So like reflect on it every practice. I tell my players, reflect on every practice session, take a couple of notes, what was good, what was bad. If you're reflecting on your practice sessions and your days in general, then hopefully you're going to take the right action to improve on that. So did you practice well today? Did you practice badly? If you did practice well, what was good and why was it not good? And I think that's if you get into that habit, then you should constantly be kind of tweaking like your ways of doing things. You just be a tiny little thing that you change to make your practice a little bit better. That probably wouldn't have happened if you didn't take the time to reflect on what you did in your practice sessions. So I think the art of reflection is a number one there. Simple things like planning your day and then actually doing the day you planned. You might plan to do like hit some balls, do some short game, a bit of putting, and then you end up just getting lost in your swing. You're hitting balls all day and you haven't done all the other things that are important. So planning like what you want to do in your day and then getting the habit of just doing it. And that's a very simple thing, but how many people actually do the things that they say they're going to do? I go back to my best players, my most successful players. They just get stuff done. They don't procrastinate. They just get on with the task in hand and get it done. And I think that's really, really important. Number 3, I would have the right people around you. Put a good team around you. And I've said to so many of my players during this lockdown that you don't have to do everything on your own. You've got to having someone that you can confide in, a coach, a psychologist, a parent, a friend, whatever it is, having a little team around you that can see you through tough times and then help you keep your feet on the ground in the good times. So I think they're probably 3 things that I see most people that are doing things well and performing at a high level do.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. So basically, you're reflecting on what you do. But that links quite nicely with the whole support system as well, because I find like some people are good at reflecting, but they don't necessarily have the support there, so they don't feel accountable. So they end up reflecting, but they don't actually make like necessary changes.
Yeah, the reflect and take action. That's the kind of rule. Is that, like you say, if you just reflect on what you've done all the time and never changing anything in it, then there's not much point in reflecting. But if you reflect and take action, and the people around you can support you in doing that, and it's having the tools and the knowledge and the education to do that, isn't it? So I think that's the art of having good people around you that can just make you do things a bit easier, a bit better, a bit quicker. So you're not having to spend a long time doing something that you could have done in a few hours.
I agree, because let's face it, they question you, don't they? Whereas we can all be like quite easy on ourselves. Really, it's just human nature. They ask you awkward questions, and then you make changes and you do it.
I've learned a lot about psychology and sports psychology from working alongside you for years, and I'm sure you picked up bits from me. And I think that's the thing. If you speak to people that are good at what they do, if you know someone that's good at sports psychology and you want to know more about that, speak to that person. If you know someone that is a good golf coach and a good driving coach or a good, a good strength and conditioning coach, then go and see that person. They can and make them an integral part of your team.
Most definitely. Obviously, the last one you talked about was planning and doing there. Ultimately, that gets back to practicing with a purpose, and like you mentioned, taking action.
Yeah.
Some gems like I thought there would be from this conversation. So big thank you for that.
Yeah, I think generally the most effective stuff is kind of fairly simple, isn't it? You can go into a lot more detail about loads of stuff, but I think the good players make things look fairly easy, and they do the effective stuff really well, and I think that's the key thing, isn't it?
Yeah, like you say, the boring stuff as well, and they've got that grit and perseverance at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely.
So Andy, then where can people find you if they'd like to look it up?
So I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Andy Paisley Golf. If you look at Andy Paisley Golf on those three, website as well, andypaisley.com. And if anyone wants to ask me any questions or drop me a message on them, or my email, andypgolf@gmail.com, I'll be happy to help or answer any questions that you might have.
Brilliant. Thanks for your time.
Nice to chat about all things sport and sports psychology. It's stuff I could talk about all day, so thanks.
Me too. We could be here all day. I really enjoyed that discussion with Andy, as I thought so. There was an awful lot of great bits of advice in there for any golfer or athlete. And when I think of the mental toughness framework that I work from, there was three things that really struck me about that conversation, and three vital questions I think you, the listener, could benefit from asking yourself if you're ambitious and you really want to get better at golf or the sport that you play. So the first thing is challenges. When a mentally tough person comes up against a challenge, a setback, an obstacle, they're more likely to see opportunities than they are difficulties. Their confidence may be knocked, but it'll only be for a short period, and they'll find a way, they'll persevere, they'll be determined, they'll be focused, they'll learn lessons and move on towards their goals. Whereas the person who isn't so mentally tough might well see a setback as a threat. Their head may go down, it might impact on their confidence a lot and take them some time to recover from it, or they might end up getting distracted and fail to put the effort in over a period of time. So they end up stagnating, not getting any better. They might even go on to quit their sport or give up on their dream. And it doesn't have to be that way. So question number one for you: when you're faced with an obstacle, do you take responsibility, look to learn, and then adapt your approach? And the second thing does link with this. Generally the people I work with and the people Andy works with are pretty highly motivated people. They're very driven, they enjoy doing, they take action. But one of the things that can happen is they can end up doing, get stuck on the treadmill, and they fail to actually take a step back. So the second question is, do you reflect on your game and your practice on a regular basis? And incidentally, if you do need some help on this whole reflection process, I would advise you to have a look at episodes 5 and 6 of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, where I talk about the art of learning and being honest with yourself. And in the show notes for those episodes on my website under sport-excellence.co.uk blog, you'll find some nice handouts which can help you with the reflection process. And then lastly, I see so many people, so many athletes across different sports who get frustrated because they can't transfer their range game or their practice game into competitive events, into tournaments, so they never fulfill their potential. And if that's you, I'd like you to ask yourself the question, on a scale of 1 to 10, how intense has my training or my practice been in the last month? And if it's less than a 7, you know what to do. And until next time, have a great week, and I look forward to sharing a fascinating discussion with yet another top quality guest. I'd like to give a big thanks to today's sponsors, Functional Intelligent Training, who are a sports injury clinic located in Gosforth near Newcastle upon Tyne and specialise in athlete development, nurturing future champions, strength and conditioning support and excellent rehabilitation services. Thank you for listening to Demystifying Mental Toughness today. To sign up for tips and advice to help you be the best that you can be, go to www.sport-excellence.co.uk and sign up to the Mental Edge newsletter.